Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Hare, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Krishna. Welcome to Pariprashnena Sevaya. We begin with our short invocation. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunbilitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin iti namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shanyavadi Paschata Deshatarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gradhar Sivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Everyone may kindly repeat after me these two short invocations. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Sri Surabhyaya Namaha. Om Sri Surabhyaya Namaha. Om Sri Surabhyaya Namaha. Mukham karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim yat kripat maham bande Sri Gurum Dinataranam yat kripat maham bande Sri Gurum Dinataranam. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Just to mention before we begin our session today, the title of our program is Pariprashnena Sevaya. So unless there are questions being sent, it will be difficult to continue the program. Last 2 days we have not received any questions, and therefore the program will be continued for as long as we have questions, but if they're not forthcoming, then we may have to discontinue at least for some time. We will immediately go to our reading from the book speaking about Varnasrama. And the new chapter we are reading is entitled, it's a one-page chapter, actually, and it is called Illusory Progress. I will read the whole page. This is a morning walk in Mauritius on the 3rd of October, 1975. And I'll just read from the beginning. The summary is given on the top here. Illusory progress versus bullock cart. Simple agrarian life versus oppressive factory life. And depending on the market or depending on Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada begins. Simply a little high standard of living, and they think this is advancement. And the Western civilization is influencing all other parts of the world in that way. Improve the standard of living. There is no improvement, but it is Maya. They're thinking this is improvement. So as Srila Prabhupada would often point out, the Vedic literatures clearly explain what are the main problems of life. There are 4 in number. These are the main problems of life. If we can resolve these 4 main problems of life, then we are making progress. And those, of course, are birth, death, old age, and disease. Although modern society is making so many arrangements and so much of so-called progress, these 4 problems actually remain. So let's see what Prabhupada continues here. Progress. The progress is that they have got motor car and they have progressed how to die quickly. This is the progress. At any moment he can die. As soon as he is in the car going 70 miles an hour, that means taking the risk at any moment, the risk of dying at any moment. This is the progress. Formerly people were going in bullock cart or horse carriage from one village to another. That was primitive. People will say, now we can go 100 miles away from home for earning money and taking risk to die at any moment. That is progress, is it not? Oh yes, people say. Formerly, Prabhupada continues to speak here, formerly they were satisfied by tilling the ground, getting food grains. Now they have started factories at the cost of thousands of men's labor. Some director is getting money and enjoying life. That is progress. And these rascals, laborers, they're thinking that these men are getting the profit, cream of this business. We're working. Why not take ourselves? That is communism. Push to Krishna. There is one small coal mining town we did Sankirtan at, an Indian community, and they were thinking that the coal mine is doing everything for us. They're giving us schools, they're giving us medicine, they're giving us so many things. Without the coal mine, where would we be? Prabhupada, yes. And Brahmananda, he adds here in Mauritius, this is taking place in Mauritius, on the island of Mauritius. Here they are thinking, or they think it's sugarcane. The sugarcane is everything. Then Pusta Krishna asks, why can't people understand to depend on Krishna? Prabhupada answers in 3 words, there is Maya, due to Maya. Due to not properly understanding who we are and what is the goal of life, people have invented and concocted there's so many systems and so many theories. So we can go right away to some questions here. This is our 24th session, and we are looking at question number 68. This is from Srutakirti Das in Kakinada. Kakinada is in Andhra Pradesh, here in India. Hare Krishna Maharaj, kindly accept my humble obeisances. In Srimad Bhagavatam 2.8.27, Srila Sukadeva Goswami was mentioned as Brahmarat, as he was saved by Supreme Lord Krishna. May I know that story, Maharaj? Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to ask you. There is Vishnurata. Parikshit Maharaj is known as Vishnurata, and Sukadeva Goswami is known as Brahmarata. I am not familiar with this story. I tried to find it actually, and so far was not successful. I did, in my small research that I conducted, come to know a bit more about Sukadeva Goswami, a very unusual and exceptional personality, being the son of Srila Vyasadeva, and not being an ordinary living entity, in that, as we come to know, in his previous life, he was a resident of Vrindavan, not an ordinary resident. He was in the form of a parrot, and not an ordinary parrot, but Srimati Radharani's parrot. So there's some nice stories in connection with that. As to why specifically, if anyone who's hearing knows the particular story around this name, Brahmarata, why this name was given, you can let us know the reference, and we can share that with our audience. We will go to the next question here, which is from Bhaktavatar Prabhu in Detroit. Here is the question: what is the significance of having good relationship among devotees to have sustainable Vaishnava communities? How to build strong and good relationships with other devotees? It all begins actually with relationship. That is the whole science of sambandha, the beginning, understanding our identity, and definitely when we want to live in a community, then a successful community is based on establishing proper relationships. How to establish proper relationships? The more individuals, actually in the 7th canto of the Bhagavatam, in the very beginning of his explanation to Yudhishthira Maharaj, as Srila Narada Muni explains, or gives a list of the 30 qualities that one must attain in this human form of life. And after giving the 30 qualities in either that purport or very close afterwards, Srila Prabhupada explains how amongst those people who develop these qualities, then it will become more easy to establish varnashrama dharma. So in other words, communities can only become successful when individuals who are within those communities are God conscious, when they are developing these natural qualities. And recently I was reading how, where was this? The wonderful descriptions of an ideal, let's say, village. And one of the characteristics was that a village will be successful. A village will be prosperous. A village will be stable when there are no bad people in the village, when there are no thieves in the village, when everyone is actually striving to develop Krishna consciousness. So this is the basis, actually. In the spiritual world, everyone is nicely, fully engaged, actually, in serving the Lord. So we can only return to that spiritual abode by learning to actually serve the devotees of the Lord. So we can best do that by becoming very fixed up in our individual, personal Krishna consciousness. Of course, there are over and above our individual endeavor to practice Krishna consciousness, to advance in Krishna consciousness. There are ways in which a group of people within a community can create a favorable situation which can help them progress and advance as a group or as a community. Having community projects, having activities which require the participation, the presence of a large number of residents in a community helps to foster, to bring people closer together. So the basic, we could say, factor for establishing good communities is that every individual within those communities are keeping a good and strong sadhana, and that they are properly engaged, that there are qualified brahmanas, at least one qualified brahmana. In one village, minimum one qualified brahmana needs to be there. That is sufficient, actually, to give proper guidance in the village. And therefore, one who is a qualified brahmana will be able to help individuals within that community, within that village, to understand themselves, to know their identity, to know their varna, and to be trained and engaged accordingly, isn't it? Therefore, what is also important before devotees, because actually most of our devotees are not in that kind of community situation, although a number of devotees would like to live in this kind of community, in a rural community, village. Therefore, one should prepare oneself those who are planning in this way, they should meet on a regular basis. They should discuss their understanding, their realizations of how a community is meant to be organized. They can be planning together many months, if not many years, before actually physically relocating in such kind of community. I often give the example of one community that I've been involved with actually before its creation, and this is our community in Indonesia, where there were a number of young boys, not actually boys, young men. They were students at a university, and they had gradually taken interest in Krishna consciousness. They had established a hostel on campus practically, or very close to the campus. And they were visiting our ISKCON center, associating with devotees. Their interest grew extensively, quite a lot, to the extent that they actually established a second hostel, rented another house. This was totally on their own, funded by themselves. And then after some time, some of the girl students, they also rented their own place, so there were 3 hostels. And soon some of those students were about to graduate, and therefore we were meditating and thinking how to continue, how to have these devotees maintain their Krishna consciousness and continue being involved in Prabhupada's preaching. And therefore we presented the idea of why not establish a farm community or a village. And after presenting this idea, they were still at school, about to finish their studies, the first batch. So they were very receptive, very positive. And those same students who graduated and who took up this offer of establishing a community, those very same individuals, after 20 plus years, are actually the leaders, at least the advisors of the existing community, which has developed in some 45 families over some 200 acres of land. The point I'm making is that here were people, they were just in the very early stage of becoming devotees. They never stayed in any ISKCON temple. They never stayed in the ISKCON temple, but they were practicing and they were keeping in contact with devotees. But they knew each other. They were friends, natural friends, some of them even relatives. So this is a very important point, that one has to establish a good relationship, a close relationship, a relationship of trust and friendship with people, devotees, who are having similar plan or similar thought. And if this is not done, it won't go anywhere. Your plans for establishing or making a community will not happen. So therefore, this is a very important aspect, and naturally the responsibility lies on each and every member to share and to be also fixed up and serious in his practice of Krishna consciousness. Yeah. So hopefully this addresses a little bit the question here. What is the significance of having good relationship amongst devotees to have a sustainable Vaishnava community? Without such relationship, one cannot have a strong community. So let us go to our next question here. Actually, these are a series of questions from Bhaktavatar Prabhu. How important, this is question number 70. How important is trust in devotee relationship? How to build trust in relationships? Similar, trust will naturally come and develop as one interacts with others. Trust is very much connected with appreciation, with respect, with love. And relationships don't just happen overnight. One has to build, one has to give the necessary time to build healthy and wholesome relationships. And this is where all of us, actually, I was going to say most of us, but actually all of us, all of us in the material world, this is where we are stuck. We are stuck on this first level of sambandha gyan, knowledge of our relationship, knowledge of our identity, because we forget actually our identity, our real identity of being the humble servant, servant of the servant of the servant. We fail to develop this mood of humility, and this is our disease. We have this tendency of lording it over. That's why we're here in the material world. So trust will only develop as one exchanges, as one engages in different activities, common activities, and naturally the whole thing has to be built on Krishna conscious principles, on Krishna conscious activities, Krishna conscious goals, etc. So therefore, to establish such trust, again, individually, one must be very sincere and very strong in practicing one's own Krishna consciousness. One should avoid becoming overly casual in one's dealings with devotees. We are meant to establish relationships, but we should avoid being casual, as people who are not devotees tend to be. We should always respect and understand the very unique and exalted position of any Vaishnava, anyone who is taken up to the practice of Krishna consciousness. Therefore, we should be careful in our dealings, in our exchanges with individuals. It is very nicely explained, of course, in the Nectar of Instruction by Srila Rupa Goswami, how to establish that kind of loving exchanges between devotees, whereby whereby one should reveal one's mind, whereby one should offer gifts to others. By these loving exchanges between devotees, we build up we build up a relationship, and then naturally this aspect of trust will gradually develop. We should expect and we should know that relationships, they take time. It takes time for a healthy relationship to develop, and therefore we should not be overly hasty. And it should all be totally based on Krishna conscious dealings amongst devotees. These are a few thoughts on how to develop trust amongst devotees. Let's see. One more question. In ISKCON temples, as we chant, 10 offenses to be avoided while chanting the holy name. First offense being to blaspheme devotees who have dedicated their life in propagating the holy names of the Lord. Can Your Holiness elaborate on that and give us guidance on how to avoid this offense? Yes. The more we understand how in the Vedic culture we see all living entities as eternal servants of the Lord, not only in human beings but in animals as well. So it's a question of developing this higher consciousness. Pandita Samadarshinaha. We have to see things in a Krishna conscious way. When it comes to dealing with devotees, even more so. Especially those who are committed devotees, who have taken initiation, and who are engaged in propagating the Sankirtan mission, the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is our disease. We have this tendency of fault finding and criticizing. Whenever that is prominent, it means that we are very much lacking ourselves in Krishna consciousness. As explained by our acharyas, the devotee should be first and foremost concentrating on improving his own character, on developing the much needed qualities of a devotee. There are so many things we cannot understand or we don't know about other devotees. And we often will only see or know about some particular aspect of that devotee's life. And it may just happen to be something that is possibly questionable. Regardless, it is not our position as devotees to be criticizing others, or to openly, as sometimes we see or hear, to openly be blaspheming devotees. But we should try to understand how Krishna he immensely appreciates any effort, any small service rendered by his devotee. Such devotees, all living entities, especially those who are fortunate to come to Krishna consciousness, who have taken up the activities of devotional service, who have decided to become initiated devotees, who are engaged in the preaching mission. It is so rare to find such personalities, and their position is so exalted, even though there may be some lacking or some flaws. Again, it is a question of developing a proper consciousness ourselves, learning to appreciate and look and see only the good qualities in other Vaishnavas and completely disregard, unless one is given that responsibility, for example in a temple, as an authority, the temple president, or if somebody is initiating guru, then it's his responsibility to actually, in a proper way, point out possibly some defects that may be there. But that is not the duty and the responsibility of the rank and file devotees. Rank and file devotees should develop this humble mentality and should learn to appreciate all those devotees who are engaged in the Lord's mission, and understand that actually it is our own individual shortcoming or our own individual disease to have that tendency of seeing wrong in others. That means that we are not sufficiently busy or preoccupied in finding out our own faults. That means we're not sufficiently serious in applying Krishna consciousness. So therefore, if devotees are more serious, are more attentive in their own practice of Krishna consciousness, we won't have time to see the faults in others. And even if they're there, we will understand that it is not for us to point that out to those devotees, unless some devotee is asking us directly, Prabhu, can you help me if you notice anything, which is something rather rare, but under those circumstances. Otherwise, we should simply be focused on our own practice of Krishna consciousness, how we can improve ourselves, how we can develop various qualities, and we must learn to be patient. We should be more severe with our own lackings or our own shortcomings, and we should be more lenient towards others who may be committing offenses. And so in this way, by developing a proper consciousness or mentality, we will avoid this very dangerous tendency of criticizing other devotees. Most of us are not sufficiently having in mind the actual philosophy of Krishna consciousness. It is just like we hear stories in the Gaura Leela of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu chastising Mukunda. And the mentality of Advaita Acharya is that, oh, that devotee is so fortunate. The Lord is giving him attention, he's chastising him. I would like, and the Lord is always praising me. So the real mentality of a devotee is that he, someone was just explaining recently, one considers his enemy someone who is praising him, and one should develop the mentality that he is my friend, one who is criticizing or pointing out my shortcomings. This is a high level of consciousness which does not develop immediately, but according to our level of purification, this is how we come to see things. And that is why in that Leela of Advaita Acharya, because he was, he was elderly, both in age and also in terms of seniority. Because of his very exalted position, Lord Chaitanya was always praising him. And Advaita Acharya, as we know, did not like to be praised in this way. So as many devotees know, he devised a trick or means by which he would be chastised by Lord Chaitanya, and it worked also. He began to preach Mayavad philosophy, and that came to be known, and Lord Chaitanya became very angry at him and started to slap him, actually. And then Advaita Acharya smiled, and immediately Lord Chaitanya could understand, this Advaita has tricked me. So we need to understand how nothing happens by chance. We will meet someone for the first time and he will start to criticize us. So many things happen either on a daily basis or throughout our lives that we encounter all kinds of situations, some so-called favorable, others unfavorable. A devotee learns to be equiposed. He is always sober-minded, knowing and understanding that nothing happens by chance. If some bad thing is going to happen to me, either through some individual person or in whatever way, it is meant, a devotee knows it is meant to happen. It is the arrangement of providence. I have performed so many activities in the past, and therefore I am getting this reaction. As Srila Rupa Goswami explained in the Nectar of Devotion, whenever some accident or some cut, if we get cut on the finger, then the mentality is that actually I should have lost my finger, but only I'm getting a small reaction of being cut. This is the mood and the mentality that a devotee, those who are advanced devotees, are constantly in this mood. So whatever happens, they are not disturbed. They're not overcome by any kind of situation or circumstance. This is the kind of mentality that we need to develop, and if we do that, then immediately, just like Srila Rupa Goswami explains, we should honor anyone who's chanting the holy name, at least mentally, you see. The guidelines are given as to how we should relate to different types of devotees. So even one who is just maybe not yet a full-time devotee, but he's even chanting once the holy name, we should honor that person mentally, because he has begun his activities of devotional service. He has begun his journey of going back home, back to Godhead. It may take him many more lifetimes, but the fact remains that he's a changed person because he has come in contact with the holy name, he's come in contact with devotees, he's come in contact with the process of bhakti, devotional service. So therefore, again, there's a tendency, what is that saying? Familiarity breeds contempt. We have to be very cautious in being too close or too familiar amongst devotees. And that is why Srila Prabhupada gave us that good habit, introduced that a practice of addressing others as Prabhu. Prabhu means actually master. He is my Prabhu. So this is only possible if we purify our consciousness. So everything comes back to this importance of being very serious in our practice of Krishna consciousness, of maintaining therefore a strong sadhana, and for the purpose of actually purifying our consciousness. With a purified consciousness, then we will know how to interact with all kinds of devotees, and we will be very cautious. We will be extremely cautious in offending any other devotee. So it's a question of, we could say, purified consciousness. That's what devotional service is all about. That's what Krishna consciousness is all about. How to develop a higher consciousness by which we can always nicely be engaged in the Lord's service, and when we are dealing with other Vaishnavas, how to deal with them. The guidelines are given by our acharyas, and this most important instruction given by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu 500 years ago still holds today. Foremost quality for a Vaishnava is to develop this mood of meekness and humility. Trinarapi sunechena tararapi sahishnuna amanena manadena kirtanya sada hari. So one should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respects unto others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we see this in his pastimes in Navadvip, in Jagannath Puri. He was surrounded by such kind of most exalted devotees who were especially exhibiting this mood of humility, of meekness, and therefore we likewise need to develop this kind of mentality. Let's see if we have time for one last question. Yes. What is Brahma Muhurta? What is the significance? This is from Bhakta Avatar Prabhu again. What is the significance of doing or japa during Brahma Muhurta? Brahma Muhurta is that very special period in the early mornings of the day before the sun rises, where it is described as being the most auspicious time for actually meditating on the Supreme Lord. We know that the hours before sunrise especially, and up until possibly 8 or 9 o'clock, but especially before sunrise, are most conducive for our practice of spiritual life, and therefore it is the practice in the Vedic culture for people, even common people, who live this Vedic lifestyle in villages, have the habit of getting up early in the morning. So the mornings are said to be in the mode of goodness, and then as the day progresses, mode of passion, and then finally the mode of ignorance. The different hours of the day are also connected with the various pastimes of the Lord. That's a whole subject matter in itself. For example, it is during these early hours that we are attending, participating in what we call Mangalarati. Mangalarati is that period where we fix our mind, meditate on both Guru and Krishna, because we cannot be successful in remembering Krishna, in glorifying Krishna, without the blessings of the spiritual master. So Srila Prabhupada has introduced these very nice prayers in the early mornings, so that Mangala, so that the whole day actually can become auspicious. Mangala means auspicious. So the activities that will make our day most auspicious by, from the very beginning, focusing our mind, focusing our thoughts, focusing our feelings and our desires on the lotus feet of the Lord. So therefore, devotees are meant to rise. That's why modern day civilization is completely not knowing about how important it is to rise early in the morning, and sometimes our own devotees also tend to forget how important it is. Prabhupada would say we should not rise after 4 o'clock. Rising after 4 o'clock for devotee, it is very inauspicious. It is not good. One should be in that habit of rising within 4 o'clock every day, taking a shower and putting on fresh tilak, and then attending Mangalarati. This is the daily practice as instructed, as demonstrated by our own founder, Acharya Srila Prabhupada. And if we do this, then our consciousness will be nice. Our consciousness will be peaceful. Our days will be auspicious, because we will have followed the recommended process in the Shastra for beginning our day at an auspicious time, in the proper consciousness, and in this way, by starting our day early, we can finish our day early also. That's also important. Rising early and taking rest early, both are most important. So this is very much part of the sadhana for every devotee. Every devotee needs to understand why Srila Prabhupada gave us this morning program. If we follow this morning program by rising early, by showering, by chanting the holy name, by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, then our whole day will go smoothly. If not, we will have all kinds of problems or difficulties. So the Brahma Muhurta hour is filled with auspiciousness and opportunity to be nicely meditating on the Lord, on His holy name, on His form, Nama, Rupa, Lila, on His activities, etc. This is actually the very last question that we have received, and as I mentioned in the beginning of the program, these sessions are based on questions, and unless there are questions, then it will be difficult to continue. Thank you all very much for your kind participation. May you all remain safe, especially in your practice of Krishna consciousness. So we'd like to end our program today by together reciting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki, Jai Samasta Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Pivanande, Hare Krishna.